Hi there. So today I'm going to walk you through the admin dashboard for CVC Exchange and get you used to some of the admin reports that you'll be interacting with. And what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through the user guide here, and then we're going to actually log into the Exchange and walk through each piece so you get a good understanding of what the reports entail. So when we look at the user guide, which you'll get a copy of, if we scroll down here to the first part, this is talking about accessing the Exchange admin dashboard. So here, I'm going to go ahead and authenticate with my username and password. And this is something that you'll be set up with before you have access to the system. But I've entered in my email address and my password, and I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And then once I'm signed in, you're going to land on this page for the administrator dashboard for the CVC Exchange. So if we come here to the user guide, after you enter in your credentials, let's start with looking at your profile. So when you're on here on this dashboard page, if you click on this little icon level here for profile, you'll see that this has your basic information about your profile. So it'll have your email, your role, if you're assigned any attributes, and then it'll talk about notification preferences. So you have the ability to click on this and basically opt in to receive email or SMS texts for certain reports that we're going to go over in the dashboard admin. So I'll get into that a little bit later, but you do have that functionality available to you, and you can set up the frequency of how often you want to receive those reports. Now, I will say that some of the reports are not available via SMS, and some are not available via email today, but there's additional enhancements that we will be making in the near future to get more reports added. But this profile area is where you can come in and set up those notifications. So if we go back here to the user guide, the sections that I just went over basically are outlined here in the user guide for you. It talks a little bit more in detail about your profile, about what the roles and the attributes are, and your notification preferences. So just a heads up too, that for the admin roles, the user guide goes into detail as to what roles are available and what each one of those roles are. So we'll be working with your college to make sure that everyone understands their roles and their permissions and any attributes that get assigned to their actual role. Okay, so let's dive now into the admin dashboard overview. So let's go here to the next section, which is the user management. So if we go back to our reports and you click on user management, there's a couple different options. Now keep in mind that based on your permission level, you may not be able to see all of these options in the drop-down box. But the user guide does go into detail about what each user will see based on your different roles for user management. So for example, super admins have certain access and rights versus another role per se. So the user guide really just goes into detail about, if you need to edit an existing user, a super admin role can do that. They can change a user's name, email, password, etc. So you can also, if you are a super admin user, edit the roles and the attributes. So the user guide really does go into detail about editing existing users as well as creating new users and how to do that, and what permissions you need in the system in order to be able to successfully do those actions. Okay, so again, we're going to go here. We're at create user, and all the details are there for you. The log history. So if you see here, based on the little drop down here, you can see. I believe every permission level has the ability to see the log history. So, for example, if someone wants to see if an error was overridden, when it was overridden and who did it, all of that should be logged in the logged sections, in the log history section. So if I click on this, you have the ability to go in here and do a date from or to, and then choose the type that's available in the drop-down box. And if you filter the activities, then the details will be here in your activity results page so that you can take a look in case you need to do any research or if you have any specific questions. So the log history is a really helpful tool in the admin dashboard. So in the user guide, there's a little section here about the log history, and it basically goes into detail on what I had said above. Okay, the next section, which is the biggest part of the admin dashboard that you'll dive into, is the reports. So let me go ahead, and you can see here in your user guide that it has a drop down showing you all the different reports. So if we actually go here to the system and I click on reports, the first one that I want to jump into is enrollments. Okay, this report will be heavily used by the majority of colleges out of all the other reports. And if we dive into it based on your user guide, I tell you a little bit about what the enrollments report is used for. So there's a little section there. And then we dive into the different filters. So that's this specific section right here, the filters enrollment. So if we go over here and we're actually in the reports, you have the ability to filter and search for specific criteria based on what you're trying to see. So you can search the date from and the date to, or you can leave that open just like it is and it'll search everything in the system. You can search for a home college. So like, for example, if you're part of a district level college, then all of the colleges that you have access to within your district should be listed here in the drop-down box. Now, I'm a super admin user, so I have access to, again, this is staging, I have access to all the colleges, but based on permission levels and roles, you won't have access to all the colleges. It will be specifically the colleges that you have permissions for. You can also look at teaching colleges, search and filter by teaching colleges in case you're trying to research something in regard to a teaching college. This here, the enrollment application status, is really important. These are all of your filters. So you can look at these filters as individual reports. And I'll go into great detail about all of those here in just a few minutes. The changed in validation is a really helpful little filter. If you only want to see students that have had a change in their residency validation. And then if you wanted to see the updated residency value of yes or no, that's just a quick little filter that you can use instead of using or searching through all of these other reports here in the enrollment application status. So when we take a look at our user guide, what I do is I go into detail about the filter enrollments and what each one of those filters are. And then just keep in mind here, in order to actually execute a search, you have to click the filter button. So just keep that in mind there. The next part that I want to go into is what I said here about the enrollment application status. So like I said, these are called filters, but look at these and treat them as individual reports. Okay, so when we go back to the user guide, I go into detail into what all of these reports are used for. So for example, let's say that you are looking for a report for all of the students at your home college that you need to validate their residency status. You would use the registered and pending validation report. And so this one gives just a little brief summary about what this report is used for. Let's say you wanted to run a report on how many students or which students have either they've dropped a course or the teaching college dropped them from a course. You would use the dropped report. So keep in mind that this little section is very helpful trying to determine what the reports are used for. And in this report, it shows you all of the columns that are going to display and every single one of these filters above. So if we take a look here at the table, like right now I have it filtered for all, which I'll go into detail as to what that means, but you can scroll in this little table here. So you'll see that your column headers, you'll have a local SIS ID, CCC ID, a student first name, last name, all the way over here to the right. So you can scroll within this table. So this part of the user guide just shows you what columns are available for every report, and they are the same for every report at this time. Okay, so let's dive into the all filter report. So like I said, you can use this drop-down box to filter, but when you do so, make sure you hit that filter button. So here, I'm going to go ahead and leave all of this information set to all and the date to and from range exactly as it is here, just for training purposes. So when I hit filter for all, the system is going to run. I think I actually already ran it. And what it's doing is it's pulling up every single student that you have permissions and access to see based on your college and your access level. You can see the status of every single one of those students. So there's 503 enrollments found. And within that, you can take a look and see what their home college is, teaching college. You can see the original date reported for residency. You can dive into the details link that basically will give you a quick little status of where this exact enrollment is. So for this student, the state of this enrollment is update enrollment failed. So it's just a really good example of all students that are in the CVC system. You can see this here in one big report. Now, if this is too much to view within one page, because you notice there's a lot of students here and there's 51 pages, you can download the report to CSV format and look at it, work from it, filter from it from a CSV perspective. So that's the purpose of the all filter. So in your admin user guide, I go into detail of basically everything that I just said and the results there that you should expect to see for the details screen. Okay, let's take a look next at the created filter. So I'm going to go ahead and hit filter. And the created filter is showing which students have actually clicked on the add class button in the exchange to start the cross-enrollment process. Okay, so you can notice here my numbers went down to 113 enrollments found, and you can see which students have actually created or added a class, and then you can check the status of where they are in detail here in the details tab. So for example, this student, their state is created, and it's going to show you here the equivalent home college or the homeschool course, right? So this is English for the professional. And the teaching college course and section that's equivalent of over at the teaching college here is English for the professional. And for this example, it's Sacramento City College. It kind of gives you some information there about the courses. And then it shows the start date and end date for this course at the teaching college, as well as who the professor is and the credits for that course. Okay, so that is the created filter. So I go into detail about that report, and we talk about how to click on the details link and then what information you can see in that details link. Okay. The next one we're going to look at is the enrolled filter. So this filter is going to show which students have been enrolled in a teaching college successfully. So if I go back here to enrolled and I filter, you can see here I don't have any students right now in my test environment that shows the enrolled status, but you can see here in our user guide that in this example right here, we have a student whose equivalent home college course showed up, as well as the teaching college course showed up, and they are in a state of created. Okay. The next one we're going to go over is the registered and pending validation filter. So let's take a look at this one, because this one's a very, very useful report. Okay. So here's the student's information, but notice here when I scroll over to the right-hand side, we have another link here called Validate that's on top of the details link. So if we go here to the user guide, I basically go into detail about what this report is used for. So in the cross-enrollment process, when a student lists their residency status, the home college is going to receive an email advising them that they need to validate if a student qualifies for resident fees or non-resident fees. Okay, and there's an email in the user guide here that you'll receive, but it's an example of the email that you should receive. And it'll basically say, you know, here's the student's name, and here's the link where you can go into the admin reports to actually validate the residency. So I talk about how that email takes you directly to this page so that you can then determine here, let's take a look at it. So for tuition purposes, are you able to validate based on the last known status that the student qualifies for resident fees or non-resident fees? And so you have one of two options. Based on the last known status, yes, the student qualified for resident fees. Or no, this student does not qualify for resident fees, or I'm unable to validate with existing data. That's totally okay as well. So one of those values would need to be selected, and then you would click the validate button to be taken then to the student enrollment's detail page to show that, yes, I have validated this student in regard to whether they're eligible for in-state or out-of-state residency fees. So that's the point of this filter. Again, the email is going to take you directly to the student that you need to run this process for. But if for some reason you just want to run a report in the admin dashboard showing all of the ones that need to be validated, this is the report that you would use. And again, you have access to click on that validate link and validate that way as well. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the next report, which is going to be validated and registered. So if we go back here and we go to validated and registered, this report shows which students have been validated thus far for residency and who have been successfully registered into their teaching college, okay? So again, this, you always have the details tab here that shows the state as of validated, as well as the equivalent home college course and the teaching college course and section. But what's different here is that you'll see some values listed in these fields. So for example, let's take this first student. The original date reported for residency was July the 7th, 2020, okay? And they reported that, yes, they are a resident. The home college went in and validated, yes. And so therefore, that's why Y shows up right there. And they did this on July the 15th at this time mark right here, okay? So that's an example of how this report works and the type of information you can find in this report. You've got some here that show not applicable. So for example, if a student reports that they are not a resident, then we don't send a request to the home college to ask them to validate that student's residency because the student has already said, no, I am not a resident. So therefore, the updated value reported for the residency is non-applicable because we never asked the home college to validate that. So in your user guide, that's what this section talks about. It talks about how to get to this report. It talks about all of the specifics that we just went over and how to use that report. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the dropped filter. So if we go back up here to the dropped filter, we run a report here, and this report will show which students have dropped a course, so they intentionally dropped a course, or a teaching college has dropped them from a course. note that the CVC Exchange will never drop a student from a course. Either the student has to drop or the teaching college has to drop the student. So this report is used so that you can go over here and see which students are dropped. And if you need to see the details around what course was dropped, you can go into the details tab. Okay, so that report here is listed in the user guide. All right, let's go to the next one. This is drop validated, and I do want to note here, there's a couple of reports. Let's scroll back up for a minute. A couple of reports are not applicable to the CVC Exchange program at this time, and I want to call those out to you so that you have an understanding of which filters you won't need to access. And one of them is drop validated. So drop validated, canceled, or ineligible are not active at this time, and we're gonna skip over those filters. Perhaps those will be added in the future, so they'll stay in the drop down box, but there's no functionality behind those 3 reports right now. Okay, so now let's go to the enroll failed reports. Okay, let's get that filtered, and then let's go back down to our user guide where we talk about the enroll filtered. Okay, or enroll fail. Okay, so this filter is used when the system attempted to enroll a student into a teaching college course, but that failed. You know, sometimes there's APIs that fail, right? So there's a report in here that actually shows which enrollments actually failed. So you can run this report at any time. If there's ever a question or a student's questioning if something happened, was there an error, you're able to go into the detailed report and see the state. You can see which course it was from if you need to see the details of that, or you can just simply look at the table here just for some of the basic high-level information. Okay, so that is the enrolled fail filter. The next one that we're going to take a look at is the registration failed filter. So let's filter for that. Same concept. If a student's registration failed, so not the enrollment, but the actual registration, you're going to see which ones actually failed in this report. And you can click on the details and see registration failed. And so I go into detail on the user guide as to what's the difference between an enrollment failure versus a registration failure. So that'll be in the user guide for you. But again, you can run that filter and look at the details or at a high-level view of all of your students. Again, pointing out that for every single one of these reports that you run, you have the ability to download those reports into a CSV file. So feel free to do that if you need to look at it from a more high level or you need to slice and dice a specific way. All right, let's take a look at the next one, which is drop failed. So like I said a few minutes ago, if let's say a student opted to drop a course or a teaching college dropped a student, sometimes there's failures in that. Sometimes, you know, the API doesn't go through. There's a problem with the SIS. If any of that happens, you will be able to see which students had a drop failed. Just in case maybe a student is in limbo or needed to check the status of something and they're still showing, you know, in a weird state. You can go in here and see that the state for this student was a drop failed. It was for the principle of microeconomics, and you can help troubleshoot using that report. Okay, so that one is in your user guide as well. And then the last one here is the update enrollment failed. So let's take a look at that. An update enrollment fail, well, let's talk about update enrollment. An update enrollment could be multiple scenarios. It's really when a student's information updated, right? So we received either a residency update based on a subsequent course that a student's trying to take. Let's say on a subsequent course, a student changed their address, right? If we send an update record and that update record fails for any reason whatsoever, then you'll be able to see it here in the dashboard in this particular filter. So here, again, if you take a look at the details, it'll show for this particular student for the introduction to living systems, we had an update enrollment failed. So that one will be very helpful to help you troubleshoot if you run into those scenarios. Okay, so those are the main reports that you're going to be using most of the time in the admin report. And again, that is going to be here under enrollments. Okay, just to point out here, under the inventory management menu, it's there again. So you have, for right now, you have access to it either here or under the reports. Okay, so let's take a look at the next section, which is going to be the exchange courses reports. Basically, this report just lists all the courses in the exchange. You can filter it by district, campus. You can also search via courses, and you can download it if you need to. So it's just a handy little report that you can see here. I will say that this report is also handy for colleges if you need to make a section, actually that's in this report here below, sections report. So let's take a look at that. So under reports, we have sections here, and then we have my sections here. It's the same report. If for some reason you need to make a particular section or sections not visible to your students, you can easily go into this area and just click whether you want that course to be visible or not visible. So this is super handy so that you can kind of manage that on your own as opposed to have to reach out anytime you need to disable a section for any reason. Okay. All right. So the saved exchange courses report is the next one. So let's get that pulled up here. All right, so basically this report, it just lists all the courses that students have saved to their dashboard. You can also filter via this report. You can also search by keyword. It's just a handy little report, and it goes into detail here on what roles and permissions can actually see this report. Okay. All right, if we go here to top searches report, so let's go here. Okay, so this one here is basically for colleges that, oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong report there. Sorry, top searches report. It basically shows which searches were performed, like the most popular in the course exchange. You can also check that based on the subject. General education. So this just displays like which were the most top popular searches in the course exchange in case that helps you in any way. Okay, the next section here is the CCC apply count report. So let's take a look at that one. That one, we're in staging, again, test mode, but I have a screenshot here for you. Basically, for this one, it's for all the colleges that are not yet integrated with the course exchange. This report actually tracks the students who found a course that was available at a particular college, and they went to go click on that apply button because they wanted to take that course. But because the college was not integrated with the exchange yet, we've sent those students to the CCC apply link for that college so that they can actually go through and apply for that course at the home college and get at the home college it was associated to, and send the process along its way through the download client through Glue so that the college can actually help that student and get them enrolled into the course that they were interested in. So not that we can track which students actually were successfully enrolled in that course once they get to the college, but this just shows who clicked on that button so that it took them to the apply screen. So it goes into detail here about the email address, who did that, the course, that they chose for what term. It shows the date timestamp. So it's just some good information in case you need to follow up on that. Okay. The next section here I want to go into is the inventory management. And like I said a few minutes ago, a lot of these reports here are duplicated under inventory management, same as reports, but you can choose which filter you like to view. And if you have certain permission levels, you won't even see all of these under inventory management. I just have super admin access, so that's why they're listed right now. So let's take a look at the details here. I basically just put in your user guide that the exchange courses, my sections, and enrollments, those are under the report section that we just went over. So we've already gone over what those reports are. But we have a CSV validation report. So let's take a look at that and get that going for you. Okay, so this is what the screen looks like. And essentially, this is a self-service area where colleges that are not integrated with the exchange, they can actually upload their course inventory via CSV in a really two-step process. It's pretty easy to do. So also, if you don't feel like doing that or you don't have the time or the staff to do that, that's something that we can help you with. So if you send over your information, we're happy to get your course inventory uploaded to the system again if your college that is not a part of the exchange. Also in your user guide, we have a section for additional resources. So we have frequently asked questions that you can link to. We also have the CVC OEI exchange frequently asked questions. And then we have contact. So if at any time you need help or have a question, you can always reach out to our support at cvc.edu. Then we have here, I've put a couple of appendixes here into your user guide. Again, just talking about a summary of the admin permissions. So take a look at that and see who has permissions for, say, log history, the user accounts, all the different reports that we talked about. So all of that is there in Appendix A. Appendix B talks about additional information for the counselor admins. So basically this says these are the reports that you will have access to as a counselor administrator. Okay. Same thing for Appendix C, additional information for financial aid administrators. These are the reports that you'll have access to. But on top of that, there are certain emails that the financial aid role and attribute will receive. So for example, the system will automatically generate out an email to the home college advising when a student clicked on the button in the cross-enrollment process that they're intending to use financial aid. Because we want to make you aware of that. So within that email, you're going to get specific information on the student. So we'll say, you know, the following home college students, and we'll give you the student name as well as the home college ID. They've added a course at another college via the CVC exchange. You may use this information in this email to help determine the student's eligibility to receive maximum federal student aid under the CVC OEI Federal Financial Aid Consortium Agreement. And within that email, we're going to give you all of this information from the student based on their cross-enrollment. So that email will be handy for the financial aid office. When a student drops a course, we also send an email to the home college financial aid office with pretty much the same information, except this time we're going to give you the date that the course was dropped or that the student withdrew from the course. So that will get system generated. And if you remember earlier in the preferences section under notifications, this is not an email that you have to opt in for. This is a system generated email that all of the contacts who are set up under the financial aid contact will get, regardless of what your preference status is. And this one will come via email. This one will not come via text. Okay. Last section here is the Appendix D, which is the additional information for admissions and records. And we're basically saying here that all AER campus admin with credentials that have been assigned to you, you'll have access to all these reports as well, or the student enrollment detail report with all of these filters that we've gone over that are most utilized. And that is an overview of the admin dashboard. So if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to contact Bonnie Peters. I know she's going to be doing training on this, and we hope that this training was helpful to everyone, and have a good rest of the day.